Hi, my name is Christy. Welcome back to my channel. I have a bustier dress for you today. And if you don't know what that is, just search it in the internet. Actually, that might yield some different results. Anyways, just watch this video. It looks more complicated than it was. It was actually way easier than I thought. I was shocked. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like this video. If you're ready, I'm ready. I'm so excited. Thanks so much for being here. I haven't used my dress form in a while, so since I'm making a bustier dress, I have dressed my dress form appropriately and marked the center line, the princess seam, the waistline, and a top detail for the bust cup. The side seam and the back piece to the center back. I'm using tissue paper because it's easy, and I have it on hand to make the pattern pieces using the red lines as guides to trace the shapes on tightly pinned tissue paper. And make sure you mark any lines that intersect so that you can line them up later. And I'll continue this process for all the rest of the pattern pieces. At this point, I'm still trying to figure out the design, so this piece will change slightly. And continuing on to the back piece. Once everything is cut out and I've added seam allowance, I pin it together just to make sure it will fit. After a few adjustments, I am happy with the pieces, and here's how they fit together. I'm using this really pretty royal blue fabric that I got in a mystery fabric box that is thicker and has good stretch in this direction. I'll need to keep in mind to cut out the pieces that need to stretch horizontally. And here they are. Later, I ended up cutting 2 additional pieces of the top bust cup for a little extra durability. I'll get to the skirt pieces later, but first, line up and pin the 2 halves of the bust cup with right sides together. And already, I just started sewing and the material is getting sucked up into my sewing machine. So I add a little piece of tissue paper at the beginning and the end to prevent that from happening. The tissue paper and any remaining pieces are easily plucked off. Next, I finish off the seam on my serger and then fold down that seam to do a decorative top stitch with my slightly lighter thread color. If you don't have a serger, a zigzag stitch will work just as well. Pin just 2 sides of the top bust piece with right sides together and sew along those 2 edges. Leave the needle in the down position as you pivot the fabric to sew the other side. Next, trim down the excess seam allowance, clip the corner, and add notches down the top curve to make sure that when you turn it right side out, it will lay flat. I've pinned those same 2 sides again to add the decorative top stitch. Here's where notching the intersecting lines on our pattern pieces and fabric really comes in handy. Line up the notch with the center seam and fold over with right sides together to pin and attach the pieces. I'm pinning horizontally to check my work. That little excess piece on the end will just be the seam allowance folded under eventually. If it looks good, sew it up. Once again, finish off the raw edges and then do the decorative top stitch, which is dual purpose. 1, it keeps the seam in place, and B, it looks cool. Yes, I know those didn't match, but that's how cool I am. I'm not. I'm not cool. Anyways, next step is to attach the cups to the rest of the bodice thingy. Same thing. Flip them so that they are right sides together and pin in place. Use a lot of pins because the curve gets tricky. And make sure you line up those notches with the seams. Take your time and carefully sew these curves. I first finish off the raw edges before dealing with that middle flappy thingy, which I decided to fold down to create a space rather than attaching it to the cups. So I've clipped the seams so that the seams can go in different directions to reduce bulk. So I can sew with a top stitch again, keeping the seam in place and making it look cool. So far, I am shocked that this is actually pretty easy to do. Next, with right sides together, line up the back piece to the front piece at the sides. And to maintain the stretch, sew with a zigzag stitch, because this dress is not going to have a zipper. I tried it on again and it was too big. So I marked where I needed to take it in, which was quite a bit on both sides, re-sewed it and tried it on again and was happy with the new adjustments. So I could safely clip away the excess, and wow, that was a lot of excess. I am not sure how I was that far off. Anyways, same thing, adding that decorative top stitch to keep the seam flat and in place, as well as keeping consistency with the rest of the bodice. The only step left on the bodice, other than the straps, is to hem the top. And since I didn't leave myself enough room, I am going to finish the edge on my serger, then fold over once and continue the decorative line of top stitching. The skirt. I've doubled over the fabric and am tracing a skirt, well, the skirt portion of a dress that fits a little slimmer that I thought might be a good match for the top. And here's where I forgot that I clipped it to the fabric. So smart. And then just cut it out, leaving a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then mark it with an F for fantastic, or front. Same thing for the back of the skirt, and turns out pretty much identical to the front, except I didn't leave enough fabric, so it'll just be even a little slimmer, which ended up being totally fine because look how much excess I had on the fabric. Again, I don't know what was up with my measurements, but anyways, here I am sewing again to make it fit better. I tried it on again and was finally happy that it was fitting. So I've cut off the excess, serged the raw edge or use your zigzag stitch, and am adding that decorative top stitch. Next, we attach the bodice to the skirt. Turn the top inside out and shimmy it over the skirt so that ultimately the right sides are facing each other. Line up those side seams and add lots of pins. Once the side seams are lined up and pinned, add pins, well, everywhere else. To help line up the side seams, I've added about 2 inches of a temporary basting stitch on each side in hopes that that will keep it in place while sewing. Which only kind of worked. But if anybody is that close to my waistline, you need to back up, please. Thank you. For the straps, I have cut 2 1.5 inch by 23 inch long strips of fabric. Fold them in half with right sides together to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. These ended up being way too long, but better to have them too long than too short. Trim down that seam allowance and then attach a safety pin on one end to shimmy through and turn them right side out. A quick press on your iron will help flatten them a bit. I've tried the dress on and marked with clips where I want the straps to land and am making a few measurements just to make sure that they are even. I'm poking in the ends about a 1/2 inch to hide the raw edges. I want to attach the straps to the back first to make it easier to fit the front. I'm using a box shape to attach the straps and hopefully hide some of it in the existing lines of stitching. Once I clip those threads, it shouldn't be too noticeable. I tried on the dress again and have marked where I want to attach the strap in the front. I'm going to attach it in 2 places, one at the top and one at the bottom, using that same box shape for the bottom and just a straight line for the top. Again, to try to blend it into those existing lines of stitching. This can be done on a machine, but I figured I would do hand stitching to have just a little bit more control, and to just try to give me a little more practice on hand stitching without injuring myself. Maybe next time. The last step is just to hem the bottom of the dress. To reduce bulk, I have clipped the seam allowance so that I can lay it in opposite directions. fold it over twice, and sew with a straight stitch. I hope you've enjoyed this video on how to make a bustier dress. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like this video, hit that bell for notifications for whenever I release a new video, and stay tuned for the final reveal.